2008. When you hear this year, what is the first thing that comes to mind? For me, I was 11 years old. And I think of my 18-0 undefeated New England Patriots losing to the New York Giants in the Super Bowl with the most unbelievable catch in Super Bowl history. For many adults, though, the 2008 financial crisis is probably the first thing. Again, I was a little kid at the time, so I didn't really know what was going on or why it was going on. I bet you, though, that every adult in the room knows exactly how the crisis impacted both the people around them as well as themselves, and have their own perception of who or what caused the crisis. Until reading and watching The Big Short, I had never really thought about it. But now, after plenty of research and reading, I've come to the conclusion that there are 4 factors: the buyers, lenders, bundlers, and raters. Each played a different role. The home buyers, who asked for the mortgages; the lenders, who sold the mortgages to the home buyers; the bundlers, who bought mortgages to make mortgage-backed securities; and the rating agencies, who rated the mortgage-backed securities. Each of these 4 factors, along with some smaller other ones, had a compounding effect. And by looking at these individual factors, by role-playing a consumer, looking at stocks as mortgages, and professors as rating agencies, we can understand what went on so we can learn from the crisis to make sure something like this doesn't happen again. In the early 2000s, more and more people were building and buying homes. This led to the housing market boom, as house prices rose 30% from 2000 to 2005. This led to even more people buying homes, as they thought they could buy them and then turn around and sell them for more. This led to the bust, when people who couldn't afford homes were still getting them, as house prices dropped 20% from 2006 to 2009. This could be a big reason for the 2008 financial crisis. As we are the buyers, let's think about that. Now let's say I was a home buyer in the early 2000s, meaning I was not 11. The Federal Reserve had just dropped interest rates thanks to the tech bubble bursting, meaning it was a perfect time to buy a home. I go talk to my lender and I get a loan for my new home. And to my surprise, I get a much bigger loan and much lower rate than expected, all thanks to this thing called an adjustable rate mortgage. I got such a great rate, I wondered why everyone didn't sign these. Well, the millions of people who signed adjustable rate mortgages from 2003 to 2005 learned later on why these rates weren't so great, but we'll get to that shortly. With this gigantic loan, I was then able to buy a way bigger house than I probably should have been able to. But again, because of the super low rates, I can afford the monthly payments. Let's fast forward 5 years. 2007. I go to pay my monthly mortgage, and suddenly it's 3 times higher than before. I go talk to my lender, tell him I've been paying my mortgage every month. My rate shouldn't be this high. Yet, my lender shows me my agreement, and it seems due to market conditions and interest rates, my adjustable rate mortgage's rate is locked in place. I didn't know that. Now I can't afford the payments on my home, and will probably lose it. I'm about to become a part of the 8.7 million people who lost their homes during the 2008 financial crisis. Thanks to the lenders for giving me a mortgage I didn't understand, and the Federal Reserve for having such low interest rates that allowed for me to get a bigger loan than I probably should have. This scenario is what happened to millions of Americans during the early 2000s leading up to the 2008 financial crisis. But there were other players who had a role, like the lenders who sold us the mortgage. But can you blame the lenders for selling adjustable rate mortgages? Aren't they just doing their job? Shouldn't I, as the hypothetical buyer of the home, have read my mortgage contract and realized the house I was buying probably wasn't affordable? So let's switch our point of views and look at the lenders and the bundlers. Let's all imagine ourselves working as a lender at a commercial bank. Our job is to sell home loans, also known as mortgages. We want to sell loans to people who can afford to pay them back. Therefore, they have a low default rate. These are known as prime mortgages. Yet we also sold a lot of subprime mortgages, which a lot of the time were those adjustable rate mortgages. We sold these because we got paid off of the quantity, not the quality of mortgage we sold. So to us, it didn't matter if the buyer could afford to pay it back. Now, if we are a bundler working at an investment bank, our job, we want to buy the home loans from the lenders so we can bundle them together to create these mortgage-backed securities. And then they are rated by the rating agencies so we can sell them on the open market. At one point, there was over $7 billion worth of mortgage-backed securities. The investors who buy these portions or tranches of mortgage-backed securities then receive income from them, with the risk being based on whether the buyer makes their payment. These mortgage-backed securities I'm talking about are kind of like socks. You wouldn't buy just one sock now, would you? The same goes for when investing in mortgages. That's why many prime mortgages are bundled together to create mortgage-backed securities. So just as you want different pairs of socks so they're all valuable, mortgage-backed securities filled with mortgages mean the investors are safe if one home defaults. They're not at risk, making those mortgage-backed securities very valuable. Now let's go back to socks again to compare different types of mortgages. Let's say prime mortgages are like name brand socks. They're the highest quality and they're going to last a while. But subprime mortgages are like store brand socks, made up of cheap thread, meaning they can be used for now, but how long will they last before they get a hole and are unusable? These subprime mortgages came with a very high default rate, making them very risky. So if all these subprime mortgages started to default, it says all your socks suddenly had holes in them, making the mortgage-backed securities that are filled with subprime mortgages worthless. However, if investors know that the mortgage-backed securities they are buying are AAA rated, meaning they are filled with these prime mortgages or name brand socks, they have nothing to worry about. They're safe investments. Unfortunately, there were millions of store brand socks in name brand packaging, giving off the appearance that these mortgage-backed securities were safe, when in fact, they were not. This is giving false confidence to investors who buy these mortgage-backed securities, who again, think they are safe, when really, they're made of subprime mortgages. Why is this happening? Well, again, it's because the subprime mortgages are rated the same as the prime mortgages. Who allowed that? Well, now, instead of being a bundler who is asking for the rating on the mortgage-backed security, what if you were the person giving the rating to the security? That would be you if you worked at Moody's, Fitch's, or Standard & Poor's during the early 2000s. What the raters did for the bundlers would be like if professors were paid based on how many A's they gave out. And they were paid by the same students who they gave the grade to. Now, if you were a professor in this scenario, you would give out as many A's as possible because you're incentivized to do so. But if you didn't want to give a student an A, the student would leave your class and go to a different professor who would. The bundlers did the same thing and would go to a different rating agency if you did not give them the rating they wanted on their mortgage. So you, as a rating agency, started giving out all these AAA ratings to mortgage-backed securities so that you could be paid by the same bundlers. So just as these professors are giving out all these A's and you start to give out these AAA ratings on mortgage-backed securities, they may be the highest grade, but they really mean nothing because there's so many of them. You, as a worker, though, at a rating agency, did what was necessary to keep making money. As again, you knew if you didn't give them the rating they wanted, they would go to your competitor across the street. And really, once you rate the mortgage-backed security, it's no longer your problem. You move on and rate the next one. By doing this, though, you allow subprime mortgages to move into mortgage-backed securities that are supposedly highly rated. Again, giving false confidence to investors who purchase the mortgage-backed securities, which are really made up of subprime mortgages, making that security very risky. The rating agencies allowed for bundlers to create the risky securities from homebuyers' mortgages, which were then purchased by investors from the bundlers, which were originally bought from the lenders, and they got them from the homebuyers. So this shows how each factor had a role in the crisis and how critical a role each factor played, and that if one would have changed what they were doing, could have possibly lessened the aftermath. Finally, we can see that the 2008 financial crisis is completely interconnected between these four factors. The homebuyers, who asked for the mortgages, the lenders, who sold the mortgages to the homebuyers, the bundlers, who bought the mortgages to make mortgage-backed securities, and the rating agencies, who rated the mortgage-backed securities. By looking at each of these factors and their actions, can show that no one was solely to blame, because everyone was to blame. And by looking how each factor acted individually and how they interacted together, can form or shift our perception on this event, and show us, as buyers, that no one should ever just sign on the dotted line. Knowing what you are signing is just as important, if not more important, than the actual asset you were buying. Thank you.